So, welcome, and I hope you had a wonderful week, and welcome back to the third class of Easy Habits for Happiness. So it's a short course that's based on Buddhist psychology, really practical, how to live in the world, how to act, how to communicate, how to set our thoughts and attitudes and emotions, and in particular, how to break any negative habit patterns or traumatic habit patterns that we have, and what to put in their place. So what I might do is put up the screen share now, so we can just go through what we've covered already. Okay, so we've looked at the first class, what happiness is, and you might remember the different types of happiness, how the Buddha identified different levels, and how often we are distracted by the lesser forms of happiness. And they're called lesser because, you might remember, not any value judgment that they're wrong. You know, there's nothing wrong with ice cream or Tim Tams or really good music or a nice family life. But they're called lesser forms of happiness, or the lesser happiness of clinging, because they're fleeting. They don't last. They change, often into their opposite. The uncertainty creates unhappiness. And if we have too much of them, they get unbearable, like, you know, your favorite song that you play over and over and over again, and then you can't listen to again for the rest of your life. And they're circumstantial. They're very much dependent on what's happening to us. And so we have very little control over that. And that lack of control really causes a lot of angst and fear and anxiety. And so what we looked at then was the other types of happiness, so deeper forms of happiness. The middle level, the happiness of what we contribute to the world. The happiness that comes from bringing meaning into our life. And the best way to get this is by helping others, sharing with others. And it's kind of ironic, you know, if we share a really nice dinner with those that we love and care about, or someone who's destitute, we have less dinner, but we have more good feeling. And that good feeling lasts much longer than just that dinner. And the third type of happiness, you might remember, was much more subtle, because it is a slowly cumulative thing of the happiness of the stages of enlightenment. As we grow and develop and all of our good qualities develop, that kind of happiness can't be taken away from us, even if we're imprisoned, even if everything goes wrong in our life. Our own virtues, our own confidence, our wisdom, our good-heartedness, they're with us. And from Buddha's point of view, that goes from life to life as well. So then we looked at how negative habits stop us doing something positive. So not only are they necessarily destructive, but they may be not obviously destructive, but they do stop us from doing things that really matter to us. So often the negative things that we do to get that lesser form of happiness take us away from something more meaningful, from the things that really matter to us. So there's a discrepancy there. And of course, a negative behaviour, a habit, just takes a few times, and then the momentum builds up. And we've also looked at how we can dismantle negative habits step by step to stop feeding the monster. And so the way that we stop feeding the monster isn't by fighting with the monster, it's by dismantling the monster step by step. So we went through those various different ways that we can start to tackle a destructive habit pattern. Instead of just meeting it head on, we just whittle away at the edges, a little bit here, a little bit there. There's always something that we can do, and then we can start to overcome it. And then also we had the reflection sheets, and the homework exercise. So the homework of going dotty, the memory prompt. And you might remember to have either the different coloured dots around the house or to have different coloured prayer flags and put them around. And so the yellow was for a happy memory. The the green was for an event that you're looking forward to. Whenever you saw the blue, it was to remember an inner quality that you have. And whenever you saw the red, to remember someone who loves you. And so let's see, I got this really lovely response from Jackie. So I've just put it in the chat. Oops. And read it out to you because it just made my day already, Jackie, so thanks a lot. She says, I'm not too quick with the chat box on Zoom, so I just wanted to say that the simple coloured dot practice I've found to be quite profound in our whole household this week. We've embraced it individually and as a family, and our daughter loves it, and it's so wonderfully uplifting for the spirits of everyone. We've also used it outside when noticing different colours in our surroundings too. Thanks for sharing such a delightful practice. I am so thrilled that that you've done it. And see, how about that? All you had to do was either get some prayer flags or some dots, and how cheap is that for a really profound happiness-making activity? And yeah, if it becomes another way that you can enjoy surroundings instead of I spy, you know, as a way of just killing time, literally wasting your time, something like this, spying a colour and then remembering something. So you have this metacognition, this added layer of meaning of just what's happening to us in our senses. That in itself then has this added layer of benefit for us. So I was wondering, did anybody else have a go with the going dotty practice? You've got time to put it into the chat. Or if you didn't, there's all sorts of reasons why you can put them into the chat too. One of them is just we forget, isn't it? Everything seems like a really good idea at the time, and then time goes by and we don't know. So that happens to me too. I forget from week to week. It could also be that it's hard. So just remembering a good thing that happened or something we're looking forward to takes a bit of effort. And creating that inner habit of happiness does take effort. But remember that effort, it's like getting on your bicycle. The first few pedals are the hardest and then it gets easier. That's guaranteed. Okay, so Stefan, prayer flags around the garden. Yes, that's a great one. So then you'll have to remember all things at once because if they're all colours in a row. But yeah, whichever one that your eye alights on, the colour that you like, then spend a few moments thinking about those. Plus, we're being blessed by the prayer flags. So that was a relatively easy homework for everyone to do. And if you haven't already done it, I really recommend it because like Jackie said, it's uplifting for the spirits. And that's really what we need, isn't it? We need to have that emotional fuel then to be able to have the rest of our life, to do our life well. It sets good inner conditions. All right, so thank you. And thank you, Jackie, for the email. That was great. Today, we're going to look at how to break our bad habit patterns. Breaking bad habits, not breaking bad. And from a Buddhist point of view, there is nothing that we've done that is so bad that it cannot be purified. So just take a moment to let that sink in. There's absolutely nothing, no matter how bad we think it is, that cannot be purified. And what purification means is it's a little bit like defusing a bomb, which is why I put up this bomb disposal expert there, because that's what we're going to become, bomb disposal experts. And what it means is that we can dispose of the bomb before it goes off. So all of the negative things that we've done, we haven't necessarily experienced the consequences of them, certainly not from a karmic point of view yet. And we don't want to, because we don't want to suffer. So the way that we can do that is to break the bad habits and purify the negativities, purify all of those propensities on our mind stream so they don't have to ripen. So this is what purification is. Purification is means that we make sure we don't have to experience the suffering results of our previous negative actions. And how we do that is by applying the 4 opponent powers, the 4 R's. So you might have heard of the 3 R's to get through life: reading, writing, and arithmetic. So the 4 R's are a way to get through life as well, the 4 opponent powers, and we need all 4. So we're going to have a look at those, how it's a Buddhist practice of purification, but it can be applied to any tradition and even works even if you're not religious at all, because it's a universal psychological technique. And then I've also got a little bit to add in from a neuroscience point of view, a couple of readings from Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself, that kind of backs up how this process works, which I find really fascinating. I like it when the two meet, the East and the West. So to set our motivation, the 2 questions for this morning: what do you habitually feel guilty about? What's your go-to guilty thing? The thing that you feel bad about, that's just there, always there, eating away at you, that you go la 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 la, not listening, but you know it's there. So that kind of guilt, it ruins our appreciation of ourselves, of what our potential is. It just brings us down and it sucks all of our energy. And it makes us identify with all of our negative characteristics instead of our potential for full awakening and enlightenment. So if there's things that you habitually feel guilty about or bad about, now is the time to bring them to mind, because we can do something about them. You don't have to let anybody know what they are. They can be completely private, but now it's worth actually bringing up those feelings. The other one is the positive side of things. What character traits would you like to develop? So what kind of positive behaviors, ways of thinking and feeling, personality traits, character traits that you admire in others, that you go, oh, I wish I could be like that. So bring those to mind. So let's just do a short reflection to set our motivation. So first we'll adjust our body and then adjust our mind. So adjusting our body, imagine a thread of light running up your spine, just inside, just in front of the spine, inside your body. And this thread of light comes out the crown of your head. So feel like you're being supported from your crown, so that your posture effortlessly becomes more straight and alert. But because you're suspended from your crown, all the weight of your body is supported, so you feel relaxed and comfortable. So let your spine align. You might notice that you're sitting forward or back or from side to side, so become more balanced. Your head will slightly tilt forward. Just let your eyes be lightly closed, or a little bit of light still coming in, so you're not thinking, oh, going to sleep again. And once your spine is straight, then let your shoulders drop. And if you're quite tense in the shoulders, squish them up, try and touch your shoulders to your earlobes, and then let them drop. And do that a couple of times, up, 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 and let them drop. Just release any tension. Couple of deep breaths. You'll notice your head should be just slightly tilted forward with the chin tucked in. And let your focus naturally just come to be aware of the breath. Breathing in, breathing out. Notice your chest or abdomen rising and falling as you breathe. Don't try and control the breath in any way, just letting the body breathe itself. You might feel thoughts or feelings or memories arising, but just like autumn leaves come to settle once the wind has stopped. So let those thoughts settle, just keeping your focus on the breath and letting everything else settle down. As you keep the focus on the breath, you might notice if the mind is quite busy, if it's calm or quiet. You might notice your emotional tone is quite buoyant, it's a little stressed. Whatever it is, just notice as if you were noticing the weather, without taking it personally, without judging it as good or bad, just the internal weather for today. Just becoming aware and still keeping your focus just on the breath. And as you're focusing on the breath, just becoming aware of your internal environment for the day and letting everything settle down. And as the busyness subsides, in that spaciousness, the emotional spaciousness, we can recognize what are the things that we've done that we habitually feel guilty or bad about. We might be quite demoralized because we haven't been able to do anything about it. So bring them to mind, knowing that we'll be able to do something about it now. Then also bring to mind the character traits you'd like to develop, who you'd like to become like. What are their strengths of character? And if we were able to deal with these two things, minimize the negative and bring forth all of the good qualities, well, imagine how we would be different, and then how different our relationships would be and how we meet life, how different that would be. So have this as our motivation. Your motivation for being here for oneself, for how you can benefit those immediately around you, and then without putting a limit on it, think this benefit will be able to radiate out like ripples on a pond. How you change your own mind can change the world. So with this altruistic motivation, take a nice deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, and bring your focus back to the class, so the screen. And let's have a look at the 4 opponent powers. So here we have the bomb disposal guy. A little bit stressed, of course, because we know what's coming, isn't it? So it's a big incentive to do something about it. So to put this into context, if we want lasting happiness rather than just the fleeting happiness that comes and goes, that's kind of a consumerist happiness and that needs constant maintenance, lasting happiness depends on, one, cultivating happiness, cultivating that internal environment and focusing on those positive things. And two, removing all the things that hinder happiness. So purification, the purification practice of the four opponent powers is to do with that second one, of taking away all of those negativities and bad habits that hinder our happiness, that put us backwards. So if we can do those two things, cultivate happiness and purify the negativities, remove the things that hinder our happiness, then happiness becomes inevitable, unstoppable. So with this, with the four opponent powers, first we have to abandon the negativity, stop doing the negative thing, and then practice the antidote. It's no good just trying to practice the good things, the antidotes, and still keeping doing the bad thing. Then we just, we get a little bit of benefit, but it's one step forward, two steps back. We need to have restraining from the negativity, plus an alternative, a positive thing to do. So in a way, we don't really recognize that we need to do purification practice, this inner purification, until things start going wrong, until we start experiencing the results of our negativities. And then there's already a whole lot of momentum that's built up beforehand. So say if we have a car, we've got to maintain the car, isn't it? We've got to make sure that we clean it every now and again, or rust sets in, or it becomes really difficult to clean. We've got to make sure that we maintain the tires and put in the oil and all of those things. And yet, and we kind of do that because we get feedback. But even then, how many times do we just wait till it's way too late and the car carks it, the oil light comes on, we have to pull over the side of the road and that's it, no more driving. Sometimes we just wait until we have a breakdown before we do anything about it. And we have a similar kind of approach with our mind too. We kind of wait till we have a breakdown before we do anything about it. And then it's really hard. It's much better if we can maintain our mind, just like we maintain the car or maintain the house, so until before things get really bad. So this four opponent powers is a way of doing that, of maintaining our mind so things don't get bad. And like I said before, there's nothing so bad it cannot be purified. So let's have a look. We've got the four opponent powers, the four R's: regret, reliance, remedy, and restraint. So we'll go through what these are in a moment in depth, how to practice them. And as we do, you might notice that we do some of these naturally anyway. It's not like some made up kind of process, an artificial process. This is a natural form of purification, but this is a complete method. And the reason why, even with the best intentions, we try and break our negative habit patterns, but it doesn't work, we regress back to them, is because we don't have all of these four. We might have two or three or one, but it's not enough. And so then we bust and we fall back again. And then we get really demoralized. So it's great, as we go through, you'll be able to recognize, oh, I do that naturally. I can see why that works to an extent, but this is how come I've just bust out again. Okay. Now, I have a little thing to read from Venerable Gyatso as well, which is a great little story about this. So what the purification process does is it stops seeds of negative actions ripening into suffering experiences. So what we have is like a bit of a time lag. We do things and that leaves an imprint on our mind. And it sets up also a momentum, a probability of us doing those things again. So very quickly, that probability, it's like an exponential curve. And that's why the habits happen so easily, bad habits. And so then we get the results of those, and we experience suffering, and then we just go, why am I suffering? Why is everything gone wrong? And so we need to kind of trace it back to what those seeds are, those initial causes. From a Buddhist point of view, those initial causes may be in this life, and they may be in previous lives as well. And so this method is a way of purifying all of them, whether we can identify them specifically or not. We do them in a job lot, which is really good. And this process, it's universal. So any religion or secular, no religion at all, human psychology is universal. There are some things on the top layer that are cultural, but really how this works is at a very fundamental level. And we do some already. So let's read from Venerable Gyatso, Perfect Mirror. Those of you who've done this course before are probably used to me reading this bit, but it's pretty good, so I'll read it again. So he says, during the 1970s, at the Cosmos Centre in Amsterdam, a birthplace of the New Age movement, my teacher, Lama Yeshe, was giving a talk on controlling emotions. Puzzled by the sound of muffled screams coming from the basement, Lama Yeshe asked what was happening. It was explained with embarrassment that there was a healing group whose method of freeing the mind from suppressed emotions was for people to strip naked and mingle with each other in a concrete-lined room that could be hosed down afterwards, hurling feces and abuse at each other. Really? Said Lama Yeshe, his raised eyebrows and wide eyes beautifully expressing the huge gulf between Buddhist and New Age psychology. What do we do with our psychological garbage, as Lama Yeshe used to call it? Self-justification doesn't work. We end up reliving the dispute in our mind and reasoning again and again that we were right and the other was wrong. And even if we approach our adversaries with clear reasoning, they cannot see it, and our logic only makes them more angry. We cannot change others, so there's no choice but to work on our own mind. The need to purify our mind is a universally recognized problem, from submersion in holy rivers to the confessional, to the Japanese coming-of-age rite of cleansing the mind by bathing in freezing cold water, or to even Amsterdam New Age techniques. Every culture has its method of purification, many of dubious value. It is possible to free ourselves from the burden of guilt and resentment by openly investigating our side of troublesome situations. By discovering the cause, we'll know what needs to be purified, and we can search for the antidote. And if in analysing the problem we discover we were the one at fault, we'll find that our mistake will have arisen from the disturbing emotions of self-centeredness, anger, or desire. There will be no reason to feel guilty. The fault lies in these emotions. It's really good language here, isn't it? Because one, he's talking about in analysing the problem, we find a mistake. Not that we're evil or bad or broken, we're mistaken. And the other, where the fault actually lies is with those disturbing emotions, not us. They're not us. To achieve the peace and happiness we are seeking, we need to purify our mind by applying the antidotes to the disturbing emotions and their seeds, as well as the karmic potentials created by those emotions. Buddha said that as much as he wanted us to be happy, he couldn't wash away our sins with water. He could not take our sins upon himself, and he could not transplant his wisdom and happiness into our minds. Instead, he explained how we can rid our minds of disturbing emotions. And that's this method. So let's put it into context, shall we? So here's the analogy. We're driving along in our life. We're a little bit like drunk drivers, aren't we? Where our mind is drunk with the disturbing emotions. And we're going along and we're reacting. Everybody's at fault. Everybody else is a terrible driver. And or we may just be going along thinking everything's sweet, as you do. If you're drunk and driving, you just think everything's hunky-dory. And so then as we're going through our life, barreling along, perhaps even with our eyes closed, we have actions of body, speech, and mind. And if we have the negative actions, physically being aggressive or harming others, the negative speech habits, how we communicate with others that might be unskillful, just reactive. Also those internal speech patterns of how we speak to ourselves, the inner dialogue. And then our mind. So remember, in Buddhism, mind means heart as well. Emotions, thoughts, intellect, attitudes. So we react with the world. What's driving it, who the driver is the disturbing emotions. We may be completely dominated by our disturbing emotions. We might see, oh my gosh, I'm just reacting with anger. And one part of us sees in horror what we're doing, and the other one just lets rip, because once we start, we can't stop. So that's who's driving the car, isn't it? Who have we let drive the car? All those different disturbing emotions. Sometimes they're really aggressive, other times they're asleep at the wheel, other times they're agitated, all different types. Where those disturbing emotions come from, their root cause is inner confusion. Particularly confusion to do with not understanding who we are, to the extent that when we have really negative thoughts or feelings, we think they're us. Or we think we're them. We don't recognize that they're distortions. We have inner confusion, or it's all veiled, what our potential is as a human being. If we really appreciated our potential right now is to become a Buddha, there's no way we'd be unhappy, depressed, anxious. We would be jumping for joy and just getting to it. But because we are unaware of that, we're confused, we're full of doubt, then we get overwhelmed by those disturbing emotions. We identify with the clouds instead of the sky. So this is all happening in the background. We don't actually even know it's happening till we get results, till we experience a result, and that's like a wake-up call. So either we harm somebody and we recognize how we've harmed them, we recognize the hurt. Or we harm ourselves, we hurt ourselves until we just have a breakdown. That's if we can recognize the hurt. Otherwise, we're oblivious to what the hurt is. We just get caught. So the police get us. We think everything is fine as long as I don't get caught. And then when we get caught, we think getting caught is the problem, not the thing that we were doing. Like if you're having an affair, for instance, everyone thinks, oh, I'm getting away with it, I'm getting away with it. Oh, just on a holding pattern, everything will be sweet. And it's when you get caught that you go, oh, damn. Sometimes you can have really terrible results. Somebody dies. We have irreversible results externally. And often those things can then, we're riven with guilt for the rest of our life, and that also hampers doing anything about it. So often it's when disaster happens that we actually start looking at this whole process and then thinking, what can I do? I've noticed this with Lungri Tumpa Center, that very rarely do people think, oh, my life is going fantastically well, I think I'll go and learn about Buddhism and meditation. Usually people come to a Buddhist center because something's gone wrong, because there's been a disaster, an inner disaster, something's happened externally, and we just can't cope, and we're going, there's got to be a way to deal with this, to understand it. So those results, those negative results, can actually be the turning point. So how the four opponent powers works is when we recognize, I've been acting really destructively, or while I've been filled with turmoil inside, I've just noticed that I've just turned into this really aggressive person, or someone that's just constantly reacting with their speech, insulting people all the time or being cranky all the time. So you recognize what's happened to you and you have a sense of regret. I wish that hadn't happened. Or I wish I hadn't have harmed those close to me. I didn't mean to harm them, and yet everything I do seems to upset them or hurt them. How come I've turned out like this? So the beginning of that is to look at the results, look at the suffering results and the harm, and just feel a real regret. And it's worth feeling that regret because we can do something about it. Then the next one, reliance. So reliance directly counters that inner confusion. And reliance is usually a reliance on something bigger or better than us, like a higher power, an object of refuge, someone or something that's really inspiring and that is already liberated from that confusion. Because we can't do it by ourselves. We think we can, and we've been going along this far thinking we can, and even if we can, it's so long. So we can actually rely on others to help us. But of course, we won't be doing that if we haven't even admitted something's gone wrong and regretted it. We're just going to be all defensive. So it is really worth going through that initial pain of the regret. Then we have two forms of remedy. So one is applying the antidotes to the disturbing emotions. So what's been driving us, drunk drivers, how we've been overwhelmed by those disturbing emotions. And there are antidotes to each one of them so that we can whittle them down and remove them forever. There's vaccines for the disturbing emotions. The other part of the remedy is to replace the negative actions that we do of body, speech, and mind with positive actions of body, speech, and mind. So we change our behaviour, our expression, our habit patterns. And we do kind of make-up activities, counterbalancing activities. And then the final one is restraint. So it's no good doing all of this and still being a drunk driver. As we know, it's no good taking a defensive driving course and still driving under the influence. We need both, don't we? So the restraint part is to restrain ourselves for a specific amount of time, the time that we're out and about in the world at least, from those negative actions. And then we have a complete program, how to purify negativities. So that's the overview. I hope that kind of gives you it's a little busy flow chart, but I hope it gives you an idea of how everything fits in, what happens to us, and then how each of these four opponent powers counter each step along the way. So it's a very scientific process. It's not anything to do with belief, and it's absolutely effective. You can, from Buddhist point of view, purify any negativity. Anything that you've done in this life or previous lives can be purified. From a psychological point of view, you can say any bad habit pattern and any trauma can be completely healed, completely unwound. So let's have a look at how they work. We'll go a little bit in depth now. So regret. First, recognizing that we made the mistake. So this is hard, isn't it? Because I know with myself, you tend to justify, oh no, I meant to do that, or I did that because I'm right, or I'm justified, or I couldn't help it, or all of these things, and we try and cover up the fact that we made a mistake. The really good thing about this, though, is that recognizing we made a mistake isn't a value judgment. It's not saying that we're bad, it's saying that we've buggered it up somehow. And if we recognize it as a mistake, regret is like a feeling, natural feeling of remorse, of going, oh no, I wish I hadn't have done that. And it's totally different from guilt. So guilt, you may not feel remorse at all. You may be really happy that you did whatever it was, but you feel now really bad about yourself, that you're a bad person. So guilt has this value judgment on it. You've done something bad, therefore you are bad. And that's a mistake. You've done something bad because you were overwhelmed by all those negative emotions. And so regret, it's how it's different, how this remorse is different from guilt, or the regret is different from guilt, is as if you found out you've just eaten poisoned pizza. So imagine we were able to have our first dinner together instead of social isolating. Now we're able to all come over to someone's house and you have this excellent pizza, and then you get the call from the pizza shop, I'm so sorry to tell you, but there's been a salmonella outbreak in the pizza shop. So if you've had salmonella poisoning, which I have, it's not a pretty sight and it's really awful. And if you know, oh my gosh, I've just eaten something that is rotten, you know what's coming. So that's remorse. Oh, I wish I hadn't eaten the pizza. You're not going, oh, I'm such a bad person for eating the pizza. You just wish you hadn't done it. Why? Because you know what's coming. You know the suffering result. So as a little aside, back in my early 20s when I couldn't cook at all, I thought I'd give it a go. It was before being able to look up recipes on the interweb. So I just had some half-hearted recipe that I'd ripped out of somewhere or other. And I had no idea about the principles of cooking. Anyway, so I cooked a fish curry and then I cooked it early the day before. And then I just left it on the stove or put it in the fridge and then went to reheat it when everybody came over with their bottles of champagne for dinner. And then I couldn't be bothered waiting till it was hot enough. I was like, oh, that'll do. Anyway, so we all ate this fish curry and then we all got really sick. So I was living on Dornoch Terrace in West End, and I'll never forget the evening actually. So we're just rolling around my front lawn on the grass, hurling without glasses of champagne. And so we just hurl, and then we'd have another glass of champagne, drink some more champagne, and then hurl. And it was a total bonding experience. Anyway, after that, it was quite a big deal because it was salmonella. So the Governor General has to be notified if you have salmonella poisoning. I completely stopped cooking after that. Everybody started bringing me dinners. Thank you so much. And I stayed clear of cooking for many, many years after that. So anyway, mixed results, right? That's the best, and none of us died, which was really lucky. So remorse. And with this one, with the regret, what it is it's mostly when we recognize we've done something wrong and it's going to have bad repercussions. It's a remorse primarily for one's own future suffering. So this part of the regret is recognizing that whatever we do, even if no one finds out, even if the police don't find out, or even if I was the only one that ate that curry, nobody else got sick, we will still experience the suffering results in the future, even if no one else knows. Because even if we do something really negative, say we're just walking around the house swearing to ourselves, getting really angry, there's not even anybody there. But that has an effect on us, and that effect will last. It will have its own momentum. So here, this first regret is really for recognizing what I'm doing is creating harm, and I'm going to suffer for this in the future. So you have this natural remorse. So it's primarily for one's own future suffering, what you know is coming. And when we do this process, what you do is you recall a specific instance of having done something negative. You can't just generically go, oh, I wish I wasn't so cranky, or I wish I didn't just mouth off at people all the time. You have to think of that one time when you did it and remember the person's face and what the result was, how you harmed them, how you know now you feel terrible about yourself, how it's now got turned into a habit pattern, all of this. So you recall a specific instance. Also, we tend to get stuck on specific instances and block them off. And where we block them off, then everything else is blocked off within us. So it's worth thinking of those specific instances and bringing them to mind with courage, because you know you can do something about them. And then we use that emotional feeling as a springboard to purify all other instances. So the time that we mouthed out off at somebody and hurt them, or the time that we lied, the time that we were aggressive, that we feel badly about, that we know has harmed us and it's probably harmed them as well. We use that feeling of regret to purify every other instance of it this week, this year, all the way back to when you're a little kiddie, back in previous lifetimes. So you do it in a job lot. So it's not like you have to purify every single instance one by one. We'd be here forever. You purify everything of that similar type. And we can do that because all we need is to remember one of those things, the one that has the emotional effect on us, that's affecting us right now, and use that to purify everything else. So this way we really make headway. It's very powerful. So even if the thing that we've done may have been justified, even if, say, the person that we're hating on is really terrible, the fact that we're hating on them destroys us. It affects us, regardless of whether we're right or wrong. So that's why we really have to recognize it as a mistake. You know, even if we've stolen something and no one ever finds out, what that does is it opens the door psychologically in us to always be paranoid people are stealing from us. So we recognize how that's harming us moment by moment, continuously, and getting more and more so as time goes on. And then we really regret that. We feel genuine remorse. All right, then we have reliance. So now there's two aspects to this one. So one of them is you reconnect with your refuge. So if you're a Buddhist, your refuge will be the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha, the spiritual community. We make mistakes because we're alienated from our refuge. It's like we've fallen off the wagon. The only reason we act badly is because we've been disconnected from our inner goodness. We're alienated from our goodness. We can't get in touch with it. We've been identifying with all of those negativities. And so we can't get back at it straight away directly because we feel so badly about ourselves. So that's why we need something bigger or better than us, a refuge. So a refuge is someone or something that has the power to help us, that has freed themselves, that's already done it. So our first refuge when we're little is mum. Our parents, we run to our parents, we need to be near them. They protect us, they help us, they guide us, they're everything to us. And then as we grow up, then we develop maybe an outer refuge and also an inner refuge. If you're a Christian, then your refuge is God, the love of God or the wrath of God, that directs you. It might be the saints. It might be the Virgin Mary. If you're a materialist, your refuge, your reliance is going to be the law of cause and effect, of probability, of, for each action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So you can draw some principles from the external world and apply them within. If you're, if you have an idea of, what's the word? I suppose it's agnostic. So maybe you're thinking of Gaia, the great interdependence of the earth. So all of these, they're bigger than us. They're elemental forces. So we need a refuge, a reliance. And that reliance has to give us that confidence that we can overcome negativity by applying this method. So we remind ourselves of the qualities of our refuge and let ourselves become open. And with this reliance, then we also have this feeling of confidence that we can do something about it because there is a higher power, or there is the Buddha who has done something about it already, and we can too. So that's one part, and it's a really joyful part, having a reliance, reconnecting with your refuge. Now suddenly we can get into their slipstream and use all of their power. The other part of this reliance is we regret hurting others. So this is where the regret for hurting others comes in, and we rely on the very things that we harm. So usually, we recognize, oh, I must have done something really bad here, because they've just burst into tears. So we need others to develop our compassion, our kindness, our patience, our love. We can't do that just in a vacuum. We rely on others to develop our good qualities. And so here the reliance is just like we fall down on the earth, then we push up from the earth to get up. So just like we harm others, then we rely on others to purify, to change our mind. It's a really big incentive. So this is where we recognize the harm that we've done others. First one, the harm we did to ourselves. This one, the harm that we've done others. And when we recognize that we've hurt somebody, then naturally our compassion arises. So we have to be proactive about this and not just wait till we can recognize obvious vulnerability. We have to recognize this harm that we do others isn't necessarily obvious. And to see that we need others to be able to cultivate our qualities. So this way we become altruistic in this whole process, that by applying the 4 opponent powers, we will become a better human being and be able to contribute to the world. Then, remedy. So this has 2 parts as well. The first part, making amends, apologizing, if you can. If you can, but you may not be able to. So don't get caught up on this. The remedy doesn't mean fixing the external thing. The remedy, because the negativity and the bad habits are in our mind, the remedy has to be in our mind. If we can remedy the external situation, fantastic. It's always good to try. But if we can't, it doesn't mean we can't purify. So making amends, and if you can, apologize. And the main remedy is positive actions to counter the 10 non-virtuous actions. So we will go through those 10 non-virtuous actions in future classes, but actions of body, speech, and mind. Instead of just not doing the action, that you also have the opposite. So if you've stolen something, then practicing generosity. So it's a counterbalance, it's a make-up action, and it's not a punishment. So it's something that we've got to find that is a counterbalance, and it's enjoyable. we like doing it. And it has to bring long-term benefit. So it can't be drinking a case of champagne. It's got to bring long-term benefit. Enjoyable, long-term benefit. Because then that way we're much more likely to practice the remedy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be remedying that external thing. So for instance, if you have, I mean, there's many women who've, say for instance, had an abortion and then felt terrible for many, many, many years. It's been eating away at them. So the remedy, you can't undo that, but you can do a positive action that counterbalances it, that is as powerful. So for instance, if you can donate blood to save lives, or if you donate to a education fund, an early teenage pregnancy education fund, or whatever it is, it can have an equal weight and equal power to save lives. It's not enough just to do a little thing, because that won't psychologically affect us. It has to be something of equal weight. Then the other part of it is of remedy is the antidotes to the afflictive emotions that made us do that negative thing in the first place. So the drivers of our negative habits. We've got to start putting in antidotes to those. So there are antidotes to craving and attachment, antidotes to anger. So the antidote, for instance, to anger is practicing the 3 types of patience. And there's really detailed information of how to do this. You don't just go, be patient, be patient, be patient. There's thought processes that we cultivate where we become patient naturally. So these antidotes, we've got to put those antidotes in. And just like if you've got a series of antibiotics that you've got to take them the same time every day until the whole course is finished. You can't just take the whole packet on the first day and be done with it. So it's a process. Taking the antidote is this process. And part of the process is using visualization, because just intellectually understanding isn't enough. We need to feel different as well. And that's where a visualization, doing a meditation practice, comes into its own. So a little bit more about that in a moment. And the fourth one, the restraint of the 4 opponent powers. We commit to a specific amount of time where we will not do that thing. We can't say, I will never do it again. We've got to be able to say, okay, so if you're a shoplifter, say, you can go, what's an amount of time that you can definitely commit to? So it might be 1 day. So if you go, okay, it might be 1 day, then it's good to actually take what you can do and then extend it just a tiny little bit. So 1 day you might go, okay, 24 hours from 11:30 to 11:30 tomorrow. So it's specific, it's measurable, and you can tell if you've done it or if you've busted. So be realistic. Difficult habits, especially ones, say, to do with the speech, it might be an hour or a day. If you've got 3 toddlers at home that you're looking after and you're trying to work from home at the same time, it may be really challenging. It might be half an hour or 20 minutes that you commit to not retaliating with your speech. Who knows? So it's no shame in being realistic. It's important to know our measure. And this we can do if we realize we are not our negativities. Then we can kind of admit to that. And then we figure out how long we can go for, and for these really difficult ones, just a tiniest little bit more. Easier habits, something, say, I will never have an abortion again. Well, for that, then you go from year to year. And so then at the end of each year, New Year's resolution, tick, I've accomplished that, and now you do for another year. So it's still measurable, and you get to feel the result of it. Now, if it's difficult, oh, hang on a sec. So your confidence, your self-confidence will naturally grow with these small successes. So even just for half an hour, if you manage to not yell at someone for half an hour, yes, did it. So then you have more confidence to do another half hour. And you start identifying with your good-heartedness and your effort rather than your negativity. So already everything's changing. And just like in AA, one day at a time. So AA is very profound with this because one day is doable. And if you can't do that one day, then you just stay in bed and you stick your head under the doona and that's it. And then you get through that day and then you've done that day. It's measurable and it's doable and you feel good about it. So here we go. Here's something from Norman Doidge from The Brain That Changes Itself. Fantastic book about neuroscience. And it kind of explains how when we are practicing this restraint, there's a bit of tension there. We're kind of like, wish I could do that thing. That's evidence that it's working. With obsessions and compulsions, so any kind of habit pattern, the more you do it, the more you want to do it. The less you do it, the less you want to do it. So Jeffrey Schwartz, the researcher, has found that it's essential to understand that it's not what you feel while applying the technique that counts. It's what you do. The struggle is not to make that bad feeling go away. The struggle is to not give in to the feeling by acting out the compulsion or thinking about the obsession. So this part of the technique won't give immediate relief because lasting neuroplastic change takes time. But it does lay the groundwork for change by exercising the brain in a new way. So at first, one will still feel both the urge to enact the compulsion and the tension and anxiety that arises from resisting it. The goal is to change the channel to some new activity for 15 to 30 minutes. If one can't resist that long, any time spent resisting is beneficial, even if it's only 1 minute. That resistance, that effort, is what appears to lay down the new neurological circuits. So interesting how he talks about changing the channel, because that is part of that remedy of doing something enjoyable and long-term beneficial. So neurons that fire together, wire together. By doing something pleasurable in place of a compulsion, patients form a new circuit that is gradually reinforced instead of the compulsion. The second law is that neurons that fire apart, wire apart. By not acting on their compulsions, patients weaken the link between the compulsion and the idea it will ease their anxiety. This delinking is crucial because while acting on a compulsion eases anxiety in the short term, it worsens obsessive compulsive disorder in the long term. So Schwartz had really good results even in severe cases. 80% of his patients get better when they use his method in combination with medication. The medication functions like training wheels on a bike to ease anxiety or lower it enough for patients to benefit from the therapy. And in time, many patients get off the medication. All right, so I'll have a little bit more to read from Schwartz in a moment. I thought I'd share with you for a second my binge drinking example. So party, 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 woohoo! Back in the day when I used to drink cases of vodka and champagne. This is how it starts out, isn't it? Fantastic, but you know, that's how it ends up. Not a pretty picture. So, you know, at the beginning of the night, you expect it to turn out all fantastic. At the end of the night, it ends up like this. Then you wake up and you go, oh no, I'm never gonna drink again. How many times have I said that? How long does that last for? It lasts for until the hangover fades. Sometimes in my case, not even then. I just have hair of the dog and just start all over again. So that thought, even though at the time when you say, I am never going to drink again, why doesn't that last? Why don't we learn? Because that's just that kind of regret and not the rest of the process. We miss out steps. So even with all the sincerity in the world, we revert back again. And it's not because we're broken or bad, we just haven't got the method right. So how to apply the method, say, in terms of binge drinking? Well, you regret the hangover. And it's good to kind of think about the hangover whilst you're having your first drink, actually. But the thing that really made me regret drinking was a couple. One was that I noticed after many, many years that I was no longer a happy drunk, but actually I was with my best friend Pearlie and we would just start fighting. And I couldn't understand how come I'm fighting with my best friend? I wake up in the morning, I go, that was a fight over nothing. There's something wrong here. So after many years of treating drinking as like self-medication, even though it worked for a while, I was a happy drunk, it's toxic. It's toxic to the body, and it's not a long-term solution for the mind. And so the toxicity of the body, I was slowly poisoning myself and fighting with my best friend, compromised health, and I also started noticing brain damage, memory damage. And that's kind of shocking. Then reliance. So we have a culture of binge drinking in Australia, and it's because we don't have meaning and purpose. Those young people, if all they have is materialism, is just shopping and getting a house, the ones that can do that, it doesn't bring them satisfaction. They're still riddled with anxiety and depression and social unease. And those that can't get those things, full of resentment and fear and worry. So the answer to binge drinking isn't laws, and I mean, they kind of help protect people in the short term, but it's reliance, a reason for living. And that has to be for something bigger and better than oneself, or it just won't do it. We need something to live for. We need to feel that we have agency in the world, that we can contribute to society, that we as a human being are worthwhile, that we have an effect in the world, and that we're useful. It's like a basic, fundamental, instinctual need of human beings. So something to live for, that we become devoted to. So volunteering can be really good with this, can really help people. But even just having one other person to look after, like a pet, a dog. So I won't kill myself today because who's gonna feed the dog? So just even reliance on one other is enough. But reliance on a higher power, the Buddha, the enlightened one, someone who's freed themselves from binge drinking of samsara, we need that to help us out of the hole. We can't do it by ourselves. You saw what happened. Then the remedy, okay, so I had several remedies. So one of them was I noticed the habit pattern. So if I just had a glass of tonic water with ice in it and I jiggled the ice, everybody thought I had a drink, no problem. So it diffused everything. Do you want a drink? Yes, I'll have a whatever. So I gave up drinking when there wasn't very many programs for even having a designated driver. We all just drove drunk. Now it's much easier to have a designated driver, and there isn't the stigma of not drinking anymore. So before, you had to cover up the fact that you weren't drinking by having something in your hand. But also finding friends or positive role models that didn't drink was really important. Going to AA meetings, doing the purification process, and having something else to do instead. In particular, something to do with your hands. So one of the things about having a screen, everyone being addicted to their devices now, is there's something to do with their hands, so they don't have to drink or smoke. But you didn't think of that. But other things to do instead, to keep a diary, a journal, journaling, meditation, crochet. And whilst you have something else to do that fills the void, volunteering, gardening, land care, all of those things that take us out of ourselves, then we have that emotional space to start putting in the antidotes to the disturbing emotions, the inner drivers. And the final one, so you might have all of those in process, but how come I go and get drunk every day again and again? Well, because I didn't practice restraint. So AA knows this, one day at a time. I figured out, okay, when I would say to my friend Pearlie, oh, I haven't had a drink in ages. And then I counted up one day how long ages was. Ages was 2.5 days. That's pretty much how long it took me to recover and then to really need another drink. So if 2.5 days is it, so then the restraint, what you can do, plus a little bit more, so 3 days. So for instance, today's Thursday. So you go, okay, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I can't have a drink till Sunday. There's my restraint. Mark it in the diary. It's measurable, it's doable. And then if I get invited out to a party on Saturday night, I'll know, okay, either I go to the party and I cannot drink, I have to be the designated driver, or I don't go to the party because I cannot drink on Saturday. But if the party's on Sunday, okay, I can go. So that way, what happens is you stretch the time between wanting a drink and having a drink. So that's that thing of the neurons wiring apart. So then it becomes more likely that that amount of time gradually grows. And what is driving the want for a drink, then you can start looking at that. And it's doable, that you're not, it's not, I'll never drink again. It's measurable and doable. So, you know, I haven't had a drink in 23 years. Quite happy about it. It was from applying this. It's very doable. So take home points about purification before we do our little meditation together. The mind, unlike the body, the mind can heal perfectly because the nature of the mind is pure, clean and clear like the sky. So we can remove the toxicity, the clouds, the pollution. It can heal. So this purification process, it's not just a matter of belief. It actually works because of the nature of our mind and how it works. There's no negative action so bad that it cannot be purified. So we may not be able to undo that negative action, but we can purify, meaning we won't have to experience the repercussions in the future. We won't have to continue doing it into the future. Now, why did I put the picture of the broken leg? Well, this doesn't mean that we've got to get out a jail card and we can just do whatever we want and then it's okay because I can purify. Which I've got to admit, the thought has crossed my mind several times, because it's like, yes, you can mend a broken leg, but it's better not to break it in the first place. So if we do those negative actions, yes, we can purify, but it's going to take effort and time and we'll suffer all the way through it. So it's better not to break the leg in the first place. How long does it take? Strong negative actions take longer time to heal than less serious ones. So really entrenched habit pattern like drinking, it took me about a year to have the confidence that I'd broken that habit pattern. And I could tell from a New Year's celebration, my first one without drinking, that was really hard and very strange. Then the second New Year's celebration without drinking, I could do. And then I had the confidence, okay, that's done. Negative actions in a Buddhist sense, when we're talking about purifying past actions that we've done, say for instance, having an abortion, that might take 3-4 months of meditation every night to purify, to really get down to those layers. And how do we know if it's worked? One day we'll wake up and we'll feel a weight has lifted. We will feel different. It'll be a tangible feeling. Or as we're doing that purification process, we may have a sign in a dream. So it could be a nice sign or an unpleasant sign. So nice signs might be a young, beautiful maiden comes and gives us flowers or offerings or gifts, or you have a dream and the Dalai Lama's in the dream, or some auspicious thing like that. But also you might have dreams where you're vomiting or your teeth are falling out or some horrendous change is happening. That's also good. It's like shedding a skin. And also for really powerful things that you're purifying, you may have dreams where lots of negativities come up in the dream, like you're fighting or you're killing people, or, you know, it's just violence and turmoil in the dream every night for a while. You might think, oh, what's going wrong? Actually, that's a good sign because you're working through it in your dreams without it having to be out into the world. So it's like you're working through that negative karma without actually having to involve other living beings with it. So counterintuitively, that's counted as a good sign. All right, so now the power of visualization. Part of the remedy is that we need to do a meditation process or a reflection so that our emotions change, our deep inner workings of our thoughts and our emotions change, not just our intellect. And part of that, the meditation, visualizing, whether it's with the Buddha or just a body of light, visualization or going through this internal process, this story, it's not just about visuals. It's not a visual thing. It's about an experience. So that's why I put a picture here of just lazing on the beach in the sun, because when we think about going on a holiday, we don't go, oh, now concentrate. What does the holiday look like? I can't visualize anything. We just go, oh, and we just think about it, don't we? And we think about the sun on our skin and the lap, lap, lap of the water and how it feels so nice to dig our toes into the sand. And maybe, you know, when you walk on squeaky sand, the gentle breeze, how it cools you in the hot, and the sound of the seagulls. So all of this, all of our senses are involved. And it's just kind of this kind of nice experience that we immerse ourselves in. So that's what meditation is. If you're having real hard time with it, you're forgetting that it's like a directed daydreaming. It's really nice. So use all your senses. It's not just the visual part. And when you do, your nervous system cannot tell the difference between reality and fantasy. So this is why we go to the movies. We know they're not real, but we still pay money to go to the movies. Why? Because we go through the experience and it changes us, even physiologically. We get scared, we get a shock, whoa, popcorn everywhere. Adrenaline flows through our body. Physiologically, we change. We go through this process. So we do the same thing in meditation. Now, the reason why we need to do this meditation to purify is that our brain is primed to focus on negativities, on things going wrong, on bad things. That happens naturally without us having to focus. But to internalize positive things and build up this positive experience and to recognize our good qualities, it takes effort. And so the nicest way to do that effort is in a meditation. It won't just happen by itself. We've got to set the ball rolling. So visualization, these meditations, they're not an optional extra. They're not just nice or play acting or something for other people to do. They are actually a crucial component of transforming our mind and our experience and how we are as a human being. So I know there's quite a few people, say in the Buddhist milieu, that have an aversion to guided meditations or visualization. And I think it's a bit silly, and I think it's just because it's tricky. It's hard to do if they're not used to it. But also, if you're like that you might find that intellectually you understand a lot, but emotionally you're still really stuck, and that can be quite demoralizing. So this is the way out of that. Anyway, I have a great story, I think we've got time, from Norman Doidge about visualization. And I love it. In an experiment that is as hard to believe as it is simple, Doctors Yu and Cole showed that imagining one is using one's muscles actually strengthens them. The study looked at two groups, one that did a physical exercise and one that imagined doing exercise. Both groups exercised a finger muscle Monday through Friday for 4 weeks. The physical group did trials of 15 maximal contractions with a 20-second rest between each. The mental group merely imagined doing 15 maximal contractions with a 20-second rest between each, while also imagining a voice shouting at them, harder, harder, harder. At the end of the study, the subjects who'd done, so this study was just a few weeks long, 4 weeks, so not long. The subjects who'd done the physical exercise increased their muscular strength by 30%, as one might expect. Those who only imagined doing the exercise for the same period increased their muscle strength by 22%. The explanation lies in the motor neurons of the brain that program movements. During these imaginary contractions, the neurons responsible for stringing together sequences of instructions for movements are activated and strengthened, resulting in increased strength when the muscles are contracted. So the implications of this are fantastic, and it explains why visualization works. Because that the supporting neurons doing all of that practice in imagination, it's like the supporting circumstances that when you go and do the thing, it's easy. So visualization of changing our experience of ourselves through practicing it is the supporting internal support that then makes it so much easier to actually change into that new person, that better, happier, open-hearted, wiser person. So yeah, it is make-believe, but it has a tangible effect, and it's how we change ourselves. So we're going to do a little meditation. We've got just enough time to do it. Are there any questions or comments you'd like to put in the chat? Anything at all? Have you found similar things yourself? Questions about how the visualization or the neuroscience work together? Oh, good. Jane says, it makes me so happy. Good. Yeah, so I'm also very heartened by this one, because I do know there is an easy way to do everything and a hard way to do everything, and I want the easy way, thanks. I'm quite lazy in a way, so I need to be able to really enjoy and be encouraged by things. And so this I find really encouraging. Oh, good. Lavinia, makes sense. Excellent. Glad I'm putting my case well. So what I wanted to do for this class and the coming few classes when we go in depth into the activities of body, speech and mind, all those different habits, I wanted to actually have an experience of the meditation. So that's why I put up this a slide of the Buddha. But if you're not comfortable with thinking of an enlightened being, if you can think of a blissful body of light or ball of light that represents all loving kindness, wisdom, understanding, compassion embodied in this radiance. If you're a Buddhist, then think Shakyamuni Buddha with a golden body of light in front of you, who's gone before and actually been able to accomplish everything that we are striving for. If you're a Christian, then you can think of Jesus manifesting there also with a body of light, or the Virgin Mary, or however you think of God. If you're a materialist, you're going to have to think of the entire power of the universe, of cause and effect, of Newtonian physics and quantum physics, and how that all works, and draw on that power. Okay, but I'll lead it as the Buddha in front of us. So there, think in the space in front of you, in your own house, where you are. Invite the Buddha. Think that a shimmering ball of light arises in front of you, and gradually you're able to make out this beautiful form of the Buddha, the enlightened one. And feel his unconditional love, accepting you just as you are. Knowing you, accepting you, loving you. Let that limitless compassion and unbounded wisdom flow over you. And allow your heart to relax, to open, to lay bare. And ask the Buddha to guide you, to protect you. Ask for help. So instead of hiding all of our negativities, lay down the burden. What are you doing at the moment that you want to stop doing? What is it that you've been feeling guilty about for so long that you try and hide from yourself and others? Allow yourself to regret it. Have the courage to feel deep regret because you're asking the Buddha to help you, and the Buddha can. And what might give you more courage is to think that you're doing this meditation, this whole process, not just for you, but for your people, everybody else who's done the same thing, who's undergoing the same torment. And think that the Buddha accepting you just as you are, very pleased that you've asked for help. That blissful white light flows from the Buddha's heart, streaming across space and flows down through the crown of your head, pouring down through your crown, washing through your heart, washing away all the disturbing emotions, all of the negativities, all of the bad habit patterns, completely rewiring your brain, cleansing your DNA, till every atom of your body becomes radiant and clean and clear. Tayata Om Mune Mune Maha Munaya Soha Taya ta mune mune maha munaya swaha. Taya ta mune mune maha munaya swaha. Feel how light and blissful you feel, your body feels, your mind freed. Make a promise to the Buddha personally to refrain from that negative action for a specific amount of time. Be realistic. Something that's doable and stretch just a little bit more. Ask the Buddha to help you keep your resolutions strong. And also make a promise to the Buddha for your counterbalancing activity, your make-up activity. What is it that you're going to do that's equally as beneficial as the negative thing was destructive? To redress the balance. Something you like doing and that's going to benefit yourself and others. And make a promise that you'll do this in the coming week before the next class. And the Buddha is so pleased with your determination. And this time, golden light flows from the Buddha's heart across space, flowing down through the crown of your head and filling up your clean, clear body with all the strength and inspiration of enlightenment. All of the Buddha's qualities of unlimited wisdom, enthusiastic perseverance, joyousness, energy, compassion, love, patience, all in the form of golden light that fills you up and your body becomes more and more radiant. You absorb those qualities. Taya ta mune mune maha munaya soha. Taya ta mune mune maha munaya swaha. Taya ta mune mune maha munaya swaha. So staying with that feeling of radiance, then notice that the Buddha begins to grow smaller and brighter. Gradually smaller and brighter. And then becoming a radiant ball of light, gently coming across space to hover just above the crown of your head. And then this radiance melts down through your crown, gently flowing through you, coming to rest at your heart. So bright, like a supernova. All of your ordinary sense of who you are just dissolves in that radiance. Your limited conceptions of who you are, your anxieties and depression completely dissolve in that radiance, and you become one with the Buddha. No difference between you and the Buddha. And then out of that radiance, you become aware of your freshly purified body, speech, and mind, radiant, filled with energy, with the Buddha at your heart. And remembering your determination of how long to refrain from the negative action and the counterbalancing activities for the coming week. Just take a moment to think what it would be like now to go through the week like this, as freshly purified. And dedicate all of the efforts of this meditation and also of the class to being able to stick to your resolve, to really enjoy the activities and bring the utmost benefit to yourself and others. So I hope you enjoyed the meditation. We have just a little summary. We've looked at how avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions, it's like abiding by the road signs, trying to navigate safely through our life without being a drunk driver. And how we do that, how we abide by those road signs and the advice to keep us safe, is by refraining from being the drunk driver and applying those 4 opponent powers. And how we can change our experience with visualization. So no doubt you feel different at the end of the meditation, right? And then just trying to keep that feeling as you go into the rest of the day. And if you do that meditation regularly, that will become your go-to feeling, your go-to attitude for the day. So the homework, in the workbooks there is the purifying meditation is part of the notes, and then I'm not sure quite where, oh that's right, so page 13 in the notes is the meditation, and then see if you can just fill in those little bits of trying to think of those specific things to purify. Do the meditation each night before you go to sleep, and then that way anything that's going to build up and become entrenched as a negative habit pattern, you just cut in the bud. And so then next week, what we're going to look now is start going in depth into activities of body, speech and mind. And we're going to start with the main one, the mind, because everything comes from the mind. We can't change our mind, doesn't matter what we do with our physical activities, we're just going to revert back because we haven't changed those root causes. So we're going to have a look at what the most destructive negative emotional attitudes are and afflictive mind states, and what we can do about them, how we can replace them with positive internal habits and ways of thinking and feeling. So it's a really enjoyable way. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll stop the screen share for a moment, and I really enjoy having these classes, and it's so nice that you're here. If you're a member, then I'm putting the classes up in the members area so you can watch again or catch up. If you're not a member, if you've got a ticket for the class, then just email it to me and I'll send you the link. Thank you so much for the opportunity to have this online course. And no doubt, if you do the meditation, you'll feel completely different by the time you come to class next week, and hopefully really excited about what we can do next. So all the best, everybody. Have an excellent day. Bye.